contribution. I think about how you can contribute to other people to make them happy, but how can contribution help you in your self-development journey?
Richard is a breathworker who is about to embark on a PhD in East-West psychology to help create the research needed to bring breathwork to the mainstream. I've known Richard for 10 years and interviewed his fiancée, Natalia, he just got engaged, in episode 13 of Going Conscious. So be sure to check out that episode too if you haven't yet. In this episode, Richard and I talk about his amazing journey from chartered surveyor to men's health model to finding spirituality and purpose. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have made big transformations, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to live our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make and deepen our understanding of ourselves, each other, and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. In this episode, we talk about the placebo effect and healing yourself with your mind. How Richard just spent a month in Peru at the Ayahuasca Foundation, the breatholution, and why breathwork has the potential to be bigger than meditation. Achieving your goal and realizing it doesn't make you happy. Vulnerable struggles of an eating disorder and a suicide attempt. How relationships change as you change. Alcohol and society. Why Richard stopped studying traditional psychotherapy. And psychic communication. Now let's go to our conversation. Richard, welcome back to Going Conscious.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Yeah, pleasure to be back.
Richard was one of the first people who I spoke to on Going Conscious when it was still an Instagram Live, much more of an early experiment. And we had a really, really fascinating conversation there and really appreciated Richard's support right at the beginning. So now here we are back in the studio to talk again, and a lot of amazing things have happened in this last year for Richard. So I'm looking forward to diving into them. So just to start with, Richard, you're moving in 2 weeks to San Francisco to start a PhD. I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, I'm going to study at a place, it's kind of like the Hogwarts for people like you and me. It's called the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, or CIIS, as most people know it. But it's like a very conscious university. It's mostly graduate students. It's not huge. It's maybe 3,000 students. But the course I'm doing is a PhD in East-West psychology. So it's got the Western stuff like Jung and Freud and archetypes, as well as things like shamanism, entheogenic shamanism, rites of passage, Chinese philosophy, yoga psychology, and all these things that I think you and I are more interested in than the old-fashioned Jungian things. And yeah, so I'm about to start that. It's going to be 5 years. And as you know, I am a breath worker, and I've been doing breath work for the last few years. And I had got the sense that breath work is amazing, and I was able to convey that message to my clients and have great results. But when you speak to people who are maybe more in the mainstream, they don't really get it. And if you go into mainstream mental health and you say to someone, a psychotherapist, I want to do breath work with someone to help them with the mental health, they'll say, well, the evidence doesn't support that. The evidence doesn't support that it works. And that's because there is no evidence. There is basically no research on breathwork. And I want to do the research and support the breathwork industry, support my mentors, support my fiance, who is also a breathworker, in providing research to show how unbelievably amazing breathwork can be for everything from your physiological health to spiritual health to mental health. And that's what I plan to do.
Wow, it sounds really, really incredible. And as we've talked about before, and as I've talked about before on Going Conscious, breathwork's something that I discovered just a few years ago but that I found so incredibly powerful in my own journey, in my own spirituality. And I think I can remember one breathwork session, which was probably the most intense experience I've ever had, and the most life-changing. Or maybe Vipassana meditation course actually was number one. But then this breathwork was very, very, very close second. And, I think that we also can notice some of the benefits that we have from breathwork very easily, very clearly. They're obvious, but also there are so many other benefits that we probably haven't noticed or haven't put together and haven't focused on. And I think for everybody at whatever stage they are in their breathwork journey, to have more knowledge will help us to focus how we want to bring breathwork into our life and for it to help us more deeply.
Yeah, totally. And I think the placebo effect is such an important part of any medicine, whether it's, giving someone a painkiller or you're, just giving someone love or something like that. If you believe it works, then it does work. And if breathwork has some legitimate scientific research behind it, people are going to buy into it more. So that placebo effect is going to work even more. Plus, it does really work. And it does have huge physiological and mental benefits. And Vipassana is amazing. I did a 10-day, it wasn't strictly Vipassana, but it was a 10-day silent meditation retreat over Christmas and New Year last year. We had a really cool place called Pachamama in Costa Rica. And yeah, that was amazing because it was 10 days of silence. But breath work, you can get an amazing session in 45 minutes. You can go off into other realms and other galaxies and past lives, as well as getting insights into your own traumas and things like that in 45 minutes on a virtual session on Zoom with me in London. And that's why I think it's so important that more people know about this and that it gets the legitimacy so that it can go into places like the NHS where more people can get access to it and have this almost free resource.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. It's something, a 10-day silent retreat is something that is, well, certainly more of an investment and quite intimidating for some people, whereas breathwork is something that anybody can just access and just tap into with absolutely no knowledge or experience. And within 1 hour, they can already see the benefits. So it's very, very powerful in that way. That's so true. And, you mentioned placebo effect, and I think it's so interesting because we're so used to thinking about things that way. But I'm sure that you've also had experiences where we now know that when we use our mind and when we really focus on something, we can change our reality. And so it's so much more than placebo effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. The placebo, when someone hears the word placebo, often they think, oh, well, it's just a placebo. But I think the placebo effect is amazing. It's like we can heal ourselves with just our minds. It's not, oh, let's dismiss placebo effect. It should be, wow, let's go and research placebo effects because it's unbelievable how effective the mind can be at healing itself. From the stories of World War One, when people in the hospitals, they ran out of the painkillers, so they just gave them sugar pills and they stopped screaming. People with like blown off limbs and things. For that placebo effect to be so powerful is, that's supernatural.
Incredible. And you talk about how you would love to see breath work being used in much more traditional medicine so that it can help so many more people. Do you think that there are also blockers around the fact, though, that no pharmaceutical company is profiting? You're not stuffing anyone with chemical drugs. This is something we can all access from within ourselves with the right guidance. And might that also be a blocker?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, as I said, the reason why there's no evidence to support breathwork is because no one can make any money from it. A study costs a lot of money, but you need philanthropic people or people who are just very passionate about it to do this research, or you need to get a government grant and things like that. But yeah, absolutely. Our medical model is, right, you've got a mental health problem, great, have this pill for the rest of your life and just we'll keep taking your money. Whereas with breath work, you can have a few sessions and be cured for life. And then you don't need a breath worker, you don't need a pill. You can have a daily practice of breath work, which will support you, but that doesn't cost anything. And yes, that is why there is no evidence for these things. But I do also think with the NHS in the UK, government funded things, government funded health systems, we do have a big burden. That is taxpayers' money. And I think the government do want to reduce the burden of mental health in terms of the financial things. So it may be that they are interested in it. It may be that they do start to give grants to things like this. And we were speaking about ayahuasca just before we came on. As you know, I just did a month in Peru at a place called the Ayahuasca Foundation, and they just received the first UK government grant to research ayahuasca over there. They're actually a research centre. So the UK government is recognising things like ayahuasca and psilocybin as legitimate mental health interventions. So I think there is a positive outlook for the future of mental health and the direction it's going.
Wow, that's incredible that the UK government have invested. Amazing. So how do you see the world of breathwork changing then in the years to come?
I think people are just going to become more aware of it. People want to hear more about it. People are hearing anecdotal stories of, I met Jesus in a breathwork session, or I had this huge physiological effect where some people, they sweat, like they go into a fever and they sweat out their trauma, and they go through all these amazing interventions and experiences. And I think it's just going to grow and grow. My mentor, the breath guru, is his name, Alan Dolan. He thinks it has the potential to be bigger than meditation. And meditation, Headspace and Calm and these apps, they're now like valued at billions of pounds. And I think breathwork, because it has such a palpable, tangible effect, it's so much easier to sell. Like meditation, 10, 20 minutes. I love meditation. I do it every day. But it took me a long time to really start to notice the effects. Like I would do it because I knew it was good for me, but I couldn't really feel it because it was just sort of not doing something. But with breathwork, you've just had a breathwork session. You've had ecstatic experiences. You've released emotions or cried. You've processed a grief or things like that. There's no like thinking like, oh yeah, I feel a bit better. It's like, whoa, I can't believe I just did that with my breath. So yeah, I think the breathwork world is going to grow in a big way. There's a lot of studios and forums. There's a lot of books coming out about it. There's a lot of press about it. Like I've got an interview tomorrow with someone from a company that wants to know more about it. It's just it's the breatholution, as some people call it, and it's as well amazing for integration of things like ayahuasca. This is something that's growing in popularity as well. I'm actually thinking about doing my PhD research into ayahuasca and breathwork because I think they're so similar. Ayahuasca is this earth-shaking, multi-dimensional force, but a lot of the problems are people have these incredible ceremonies, but they don't integrate them into their life because they don't have the support, and we don't have the sort of the traditions and the structures in our culture to support people. But I think breathwork could be one of those support structures. And I think because you can do breathwork every day for the rest of your life, whereas ayahuasca, you only do a few ceremonies a year, it has the potential to have that long-lasting change of I'm doing small incremental changes and processing emotions every day. And the combination of those two things, ayahuasca, breathwork, could be, very synergistic.
Incredible. And how do you think technology might help the spread of breathwork globally?
Well, yeah, simply Zoom is one way. I was just doing groups and one-to-ones in person, and as well as when I'm doing the in-person stuff, you get more of a sense of people. I do something called acupressure with them, where I'm sort of it's a cross between acupuncture and massage. And I just thought, well, breathwork is only something you do in person because I need to do the acupressure. But once I was forced into doing it on Zoom, I was finding amazing things, amazing results. People were having incredible sessions. I do sound like I'm selling it. I'm catching myself there. Maybe, yeah. I'm not exaggerating. I am just repeating what people have said to me. And Instagram Live is another one. My friend Breath with James on Instagram, he does regular sessions for free on Instagram Live. That's one way it's getting much more accessed. He also has like an online studio. So does Breath Guru. He has an app. So people are able to do these breathwork techniques on their own without supervision for a very small fee. So yeah, it's able to do. Technology is able to spread it from, you know, here in London, you can do a session in Australia or the US or wherever you are. It's just becoming much more accessible.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing also just as there's a growing global community of conscious people who are interested in exploring breath work for whatever reason, that they can all start to connect and create one movement. It's really amazing to see that, and to see how in so many different places from different backgrounds and different cultures, breath work seems to be something which has huge momentum behind it.
Yeah, and it is a multicultural phenomenon. Pranayama has been a part of yoga for centuries, and now we have the breathwork I do, which is the umbrella term for it is conscious connected breathwork. Other people may know it as clarity breathwork, transformational breathwork, holotropic breathwork. This is the Western part of breathwork, and this was the one that was invented by Dr. Stanislav Grof, he was working at the Esalen Institute in California. He did a lot of research on LSD back when it was legal, and then they made it illegal to do research, and a lot of progress was lost. But he found out that with this breathwork technique, this conscious connected breathwork technique, you could put people into similar states as you do on psilocybin mushrooms, on LSD, on ayahuasca. And that's how it started back in the 60s. And it's just been growing and growing. And now on the tails of meditation, we have this breath work taking off like it is today.
Amazing. So, Richard, let's zoom out for a moment. And I'd love to just talk a little bit about your incredible journey from real estate. You were in corporate real estate, you were a fitness model, and in quite a different world. And then making this huge change to a much more purpose-driven life, if I can say, following your passion and mission. So can you tell us a bit about that, just about the change you made and what drove you to make that change?
Yeah, so I was a chartered surveyor, quite an English term. And at the same time, I was going to the gym a lot, and I wanted to be a fitness model. And for my whole life as a teenager, I was doing press ups in my bedroom and flexing my puny little muscles in the mirror and thinking one day I'm going to be in men's health, and then I'll be happy. It was that if it was when then I'm messing up, but basically it was like, I'll be happy when I get something. I'll be happy when I'm on the cover of Men's Health. And I was depressed throughout my teenage years and much of my early 20s. And then I did manage to get into Men's Health, and I was really happy for a few weeks. And then my depression didn't go away. And then it got worse because I was like, well, now what? I've achieved what I sought out to achieve, my biggest goal, and I'm still not happy. This is terrible. Now what do I do? And I just felt like I'd been lied to. I felt like, well, my whole life, people told me that I'll be happy when I'm successful. And whatever your measure of success is, for me, it was Men's Health. For other person, it's a fancy car or a job or something like that. I just did not know what to do. So I was lost. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, what if I get into like a bigger magazine, or I get a better body? And then I tried to do that again, and basically I ended up getting an eating disorder, which I at the time I thought was ironic, but now I've realized that a lot of people who get into fitness modeling and regular modeling, of course, do develop eating disorders. So I had the eating disorder for maybe 9 years, and then managed to change my life completely. Basically, I quit the real estate. I studied nutrition, and then I studied life coaching, and I got very much into biohacking, the sort of extreme health stuff, at the same time as getting more into psychotherapy, doing a lot of processes, doing a lot of meditation. I was studying a master's in psychotherapy, but then I got very frustrated with that, and hence I've switched to doing the PhD in East-West psychology. We can talk more about why I got so frustrated with regular psychotherapy. And yes, I discovered breathwork and ayahuasca, and that was the real tipping point for me. That was what got me over the eating disorder. That was what got me in touch with real spirituality. Before I was like, oh yeah, spirituality is great. Like that would be great if I met God, and that would be great if I had that support. But it was never something I could really connect to in my day-to-day life. Then I discovered, the entheogens like ayahuasca and breathwork, and I could actually connect to a more real spirituality for me, and I found that support through those means. These like vehicles. The breathwork is a vehicle. It takes you to a state of consciousness where you can connect to whatever you want to connect to, basically. And for me, it was spirit.
Was there one key moment that made you make this massive change and shift in your life?
One key moment. A suicide attempt, effectively. Sorry to take it into sort of the dark and depressing, but for me, it's not dark and depressing. It was a miracle in some senses. I was working in that job, very depressed. My eating disorder was rampantly out of control. I was eating, binge eating like mad. I was drinking a little bit as well. Like I'd never call myself an alcoholic, but for this 1 week, I just started drinking because I was just so low. And basically, my girlfriend at the time had gone to bed, and I decided I wanted to stay up and watch a movie. And then I basically started planning my death and tying up a noose. And then for no reason at all, my girlfriend just walks back in at 3 a.m, just as I'm tying up the noose, and sees me and stops me. And to this day, I don't understand why she came in at that moment, but I'd like to think it was a miracle. I would like to think it was spirit waking her up and going like, go and check on Richard. He's not okay. So yeah, from that point on, I was very materialistic in the sense of, Newtonian physics. I didn't believe in spirit. And then from that point on, my girlfriend at the time started introducing me to people like Eckhart Tolle. I did something called the Hoffman process. I did something called the path of love. And slowly I kind of had to accept that there was more to life than the Newtonian physics, because it just didn't work for me. I was just so miserable believing in those things. And then I realized that if I believed in, love and spirit and things like that, I was just happier, whether it's true or not. Doesn't really matter, because I'm just happier. I'm better. I'm a nicer person to be around. I'm doing nicer things for people. And I think that's a good enough reason to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Really an incredible story, just that moment. And wow, I remember the time, of course. It's really, unexplainable, but also so easy to explain at the same time if you just believe and trust in something more. And so as you've made this shift from that dark time to where you are now, how has breathwork specifically impacted your change?
Yeah, so very clearly to me was how it supported me with addiction and the binge eating. I consider my eating disorder a form of addiction. I did the 12 steps in Overeaters Anonymous, which I would really recommend. And with addiction, it is a coping mechanism. It is, I am stressed, so I can't cope with this stress, so I'm just going to go unconscious with my addiction. But with those things, when you take something away, you have to add back in. So when I took away the ability to binge eat, or when I decided not to binge eat, breathwork was the thing that came in to support me. So rather than going to the food cupboard, I would go to a breathwork session, just on my own. And I think that it works in two ways. Firstly, it's that kind of like emergency response, the emergency of like, I'm stressed, I'm going to go manage my stress because I've overfilled my bucket and it's leaking. I'm going to go take some of that stress out of the bucket with a little breathwork session. And as well, it's the sort of the day-to-day maintenance of I'm going to do breathwork every day so that my bucket never gets to the top. It's always kind of half full. So it's kind of that maintenance dose of breath. I did basically 10 minutes a day every day for a couple of years. I still do that before bed because it helps me sleep. And then also I'll do a bigger session once a week of like a 40-minute one with a breathworker friend, or doing it online with Breath with James on an Instagram or something like that.
If you enjoy Going Conscious, please subscribe for a new episode every Wednesday. If you think your friends and networks would benefit from listening, please share this podcast of fulfillment and freedom with them. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. It's great to read what you think, and your support makes a big difference. Together, let's grow our courage and tools to transform and live the lives we really want to. As well as creating Going Conscious, I work as a transformation coach and conscious brand consultant. I'm on a mission to help holistically maximize conscious entrepreneurs to drive positive changes for themselves, others, and the planet. I can help you to transition and level up personally, and I can help your brand grow and make a bigger impact. To connect with me and find out more about how we can work together, find me on Instagram at Nikki Trott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. Please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and let's talk about your path of growth and development. And what were the hardest parts of this big change that you've made in your life? Because, of course, it changes where you are in your mindset, but it's changed everything, from the work that you're doing through to the people who you spend time with, to the places you're going. And what's been the hardest part about that?
Yeah, I think the relationships I had have changed so much. I think people generally good, but they don't really want you to change because that's new, that's scary, that's the unknown. So when I was going through these changes, there was a lot of resistance of being like, why are you going to Peru and doing ayahuasca? Like, what is that? Are you just going off to take drugs, or are you going to be a different person? Are you going to leave us? There was a lot of fears played out with friends and family. I think also there was a lot of projection from me onto other people. Like when I saw a friend who was similar to me, a banker or something like that, and they became depressed and they wouldn't do what I told them, then I would get very angry at them, basically. So let's say, my friend would come to me and say, I'm depressed, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm not happy. And I would be like, well, you've just got to go do an ayahuasca ceremony, or you've got to do meditation, or you've got to do breath work. And then I would just get so annoyed at them for suffering. Well, all they were doing was suffering, and I wouldn't let them suffer. I couldn't watch other people suffer. And I think that's been a real lesson for me as a breath worker. What I do all day is watch people suffer, and I have to tolerate people's suffering. Obviously, if they did everything I say, like, clean up your diet, reduce EMFs, get out in nature, do breath work every day, get a therapist, I believe they would be free from suffering. But that's just not how people work. And so for me, I guess, the biggest challenge was to let other people suffer and to be okay in myself being happy. Because when you're really happy and vibrating at a high frequency, like I am now compared to where I used to be, I'm not saying I'm super high, but I'm certainly better than I used to be. There's a lot of guilt attached to that as well when people are still sort of suffering. There's that analogy of the lobsters in the net. When a load of lobsters are caught by a fishing net, one of them starts to climb up and starts to break free. The other lobsters will pull it down because they don't want it to be free. They don't want it to leave them. And I think there's a lot of that on a lot of people's journey. And I would say that was a big part of my my struggles for a long time.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. Absolutely. It's interesting how you talk about, the sense of the fear of change that all people have to some degree, and then how that affects friendships and people not wanting those around them to change. It rocks their own environment somehow. I experienced that so much as well on my own spiritual path. I think for me, one of the biggest things was I felt that when I made certain changes, maybe this is just my own interpretation and not based in reality, but I felt like sometimes people around me were feeling confronted, like my change was forcing them to consider what they were doing and they weren't ready to look at it. For example, when I quit drinking alcohol, which is such a normal thing in our society, I felt that was a really good example. Also, becoming vegan, and other things as well in my spiritual journey. But it just really felt like then people would find and feel almost that you were saying, you should be vegan, you should stop drinking. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying this is a choice I'm making. But it was interesting to see that the people who obviously have an issue with alcohol or, the way that they're eating or other topics, people who have an issue are the ones who really get offended by the choices that you make. And it's really interesting because you need to balance your respect and gratitude for long friendships and, unconditional love, but at the same time, allow yourself to be free enough to move through life and to have space open for the new people who need to come in.
Yeah, for sure. That alcohol story is a very familiar one, not just for me, but I have several friends who have struggled with that same thing. There's the very familiar route of you start drinking as a teenager, then you go to university and drink even more, then you come out of university and you move to London and you drink even more, and then it stops working. And for me, and it sounds like you and several of my friends, it became a real issue when we just didn't want to go to the pub anymore and watch people drink. We wanted to do other things. And people don't like that. They see you not drinking, and sometimes they'll quite forcefully push drink on you. I have a friend who he told me stories like his friend, he would basically try and placate people by having one beer, and then his friends would just keep buying him more beers. So he would just be sort of nursing this beer for an hour or two, and then his friends would go up for another round and put another one next to him and put another one next to him, to the point where he had just like 5 full glasses of beer in front of him that he was just refusing to drink. But they were kind of like bullying him in a sense because they wanted him to be a part of their tradition. They wanted him to be a part of their fun in their sense. I guess that's how they saw it. But people go to extreme measures to get their way, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and as we go through these experiences, hopefully we're all learning. And I just celebrated New Year's Eve with a very small number of friends in Berlin because of the lockdown. It was very strict regulations, but we had a few people, and I was so surprised at the number of people who actually talked to me about alcohol, and to my husband, who also doesn't drink. It was New Year's Eve and no one has really seen each other or done much in the last months. And there we were with drinks in our hands, and people were saying, hey, I want to ask you about you're not drinking, and I feel like alcohol is part of my identity and I don't know what I'd do without it, but I also know it's bad for me, and I'm scared to let it go, but it's not serving me. And someone else said to me that she felt like every time she drinks, she knows she's just poisoning herself, but she's not sure what life would be like without it. And it's so interesting to see that just on this alcohol topic, more and more people are becoming so conscious and aware and really reconsidering. And I think, each one of us who just follows what feels right for them can also help to inspire others to do the same. And, we're always learning.
Yeah, and alcohol's such a confusing one because, yes, it is a poison, or our body reacts to it by creating acetaldehyde, which is a poison. But if you look at the work of Walter Longo and his blue zone studies, you'll find that in all the blue zones, they all drink alcohol. These are the blue zones of the people, places in the world like Osaka, Japan. There's an island in Greece. I think Sardinia in Italy. Nosara area in Costa Rica, where there's like a freakish amount of people who live to over 100. And there's been a lot of research into those areas. And interestingly enough, they all drink alcohol pretty much every day, which is strange. But when you look into it, you can think of the process of hormesis. Hormesis is basically a little bit of stress creates more of a relaxation. So an ice bath, that is a hormetic stress. Too much of an ice bath, if you stayed in, freezing cold waters for an hour, you would die of hypothermia. Whereas if you do a 2-minute ice bath, your body reacts with a very positive immune response, as well as energetic response, and as well as mental response. And with alcohol, too much alcohol will eventually kill you, but a little bit, like 1 glass a day, may be having this hormetic response. But also, it's not just about the alcohol itself, it's how people are drinking. They are having 1 glass with dinner, with friends, whereas a lot of people are drinking a bottle of wine in front of Netflix on their own on a Tuesday night. That's when it becomes a real problem. Or they're doing that every day for many, many years, and the accumulation becomes a problem. So I think alcohol is such a big part of our culture, but it's not such a black and white thing of like everyone must stop drinking alcohol. It's maybe we should just have some alcohol, like to cheers on New Year's Eve, like 1 glass, or on a birthday or at a wedding. And I think there's so much nuance to these questions that get lost in Daily Mail headlines that, most of our culture now just reads a headline and that's all the information they'll take in on a subject.
Yeah, you're completely right. It is more nuanced, absolutely. And I think there's also a lot more to consider than just the physical as well. I mean, there will always be different research that shows different things around the physical, but also just on mindset. I mean, for me personally, I never felt at all that I had an alcohol problem, but actually then I realized that me and everyone that I've known has an alcohol problem. And, it's an addictive drug. It's that simple. And for me, stopping drinking alcohol and stopping drinking caffeine, where I only had 1 or 2 coffees a day, but actually getting any addictive substance completely out of my life, and those were the only 2 that I had, then it really changed my mindset. And it's so subtle because, like I say, there was no feeling of addiction when I was consuming those things. But when I got rid of them, I just felt a new level of balance and connection in myself. And yeah, it's a personal thing and just my experience. But I think that there's a lot to be said for the freedom that you can experience when you remove yourself from these habits.
Yeah, definitely. I think the key to what you've said there is it's a personal choice and it's my personal experience. And there is this concept of like pharmacological determinism, this idea that basically the drug determines the outcome. Like people have been led to believe that if you try heroin once, then you are going to be addicted forever because heroin is an addictive drug. But that's not what happens. Like if you look at what happened in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War, something like 80% of the American troops were using heroin. But when it came back, only like 1 or 2% of them continued to use heroin. Those figures are not going to be accurate. But the point is, you can try heroin, but it doesn't mean you're going to be addicted to it. Same with alcohol, same with nicotine, same with Instagram. It's not the substance that determines the outcome. It's the person, it's the person's environment, it's the person's attitude. And yeah, for me, I hardly ever drink alcohol. I went like a year and a half without drinking alcohol. But it is something I occasionally drink now. And yeah, I think we need to get away from this idea of like, I'm not saying you're blaming alcohol for anything, but in our culture, there is this kind of blame culture of like, well, if we got rid of cigarettes, no one would be addicted to them. Or if we got rid of alcohol, no one would be addicted to it. Or if we made crack cocaine illegal, no one would be addicted to it. But lots of people try crack cocaine once and never do it again. It's not the drug that's to blame. It's our approach to it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And, if we don't go deeper and look at the reasons why we're following addictive behavior, then, we just find another thing. So if there's no alcohol and no cigarettes, I'm sure, if you haven't healed what's calling for these addictive patterns from within you, then you can find another way to harm yourself. So yeah, it's absolutely not just about that kind of surface level.
Yeah, and that's why as I mentioned, I stopped studying psychotherapy, because I felt like it was kind of putting a band-aid on the problem, like a band-aid on a leg that had been cut off. The approach was, well, we're on a treadmill, or you have a person on a treadmill, and that treadmill is life, basically. And then that person falls off the treadmill, and then they come to a psychotherapist with depression, anxiety, insomnia, whatever it is. And then it's our job to fix them up and then put them back on that treadmill. But to me, the more the more I became aware of these things, I realized the treadmill is the problem. It's not the people. It's like, we need to be reforming the treadmill. We need to be looking at society, how society and our culture and our behaviors and our structures are contributing to mental health issues. It's not just, right, well, this generation of humans are just weak. As the baby boomers would love to say, all millennials are just entitled. Well, that's because they were our parents. They created that, but they're not taking any responsibility for it. And if we see, like, chronic illnesses have gone up from 3% in 1989 to 53% today, it's not just people today are sicker. It's that we are doing something in our society that is creating these illnesses, and that really needs to be looked at in much more depth. And it's going to be a real uphill battle, because a big part of our problem, I think, is the pharmaceutical industry and Western medicine. Iatrogenic illness is the third biggest killer in the West. That's just medical malpractice, and people don't want to hear that. People don't want to know that doctors make mistakes. They want to trust. But we need to look into these things. And thankfully, I think it was the American Doctors Association, they did a big, like, front page spread on their own magazine saying, we are the third biggest killer in the West. What are we going to do about this? And that awareness is the first thing, and then we can actually start to make those changes. But it's a difficult topic to broach, especially at the moment with all the COVID differing of opinions and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's a very difficult topic, but it's an important one. And I'm wondering, Richard, is there something that you believe that you think no one else believes?
Oh God, I don't know. Well, a lot of the things I saw on ayahuasca journeys, I certainly wouldn't have believed they were possible when before I'd had those experiences. So for one example, I could hear people's thoughts in an ayahuasca journey. Like, I could hear whispering, and I kept on looking around, being like, who is whispering? Can they shut up? Because I'm trying to have a journey here. And then I would look around. I'd even shine my torch on them and be like, stop whispering. And I realized they weren't whispering. They weren't. It was spirit in my head. And it was also, as well as spirit, I couldn't really make out what they were saying. I could actually hear the voice of another participant. I could hear her mind chatter. And I mean, I don't know if it was me going mental, or if it was actually me having psychic powers, but I do believe there is a lot more to the psychic phenomenon, and Rupert Sheldrake and Dean Radin have written a lot about this kind of like phenomena of the psi phenomena. And I think that's where human consciousness will go. It will go to more psychic things, because communication, if you follow like Ludwig Wittgenstein, he would say that language is it's just not fit for purpose. No one really understands what each other are saying. But if we're able to psychically communicate in the future, then that's really going to speed up where we're going. And even Elon Musk is on this. He has his Neuralink project, which is going to basically enable people to communicate without words. And whether it's through technology or through psychic phenomena, I do believe that will be a big part of the human evolution. And the whole psi phenomena, what I use to sort of back it up is the US government asked for a report on psi and all these things. And the conclusion of this big government report was, well, not government report, military report, was psychic phenomena is a threat to national security in America. The Americans did this research on like non-locality and remote viewing and things like that, and they were very afraid of what the Russians were doing. And in this government report, they said, yes, it is a threat. It is real. It is possible. And I think there's probably not that many more things more conclusive or give more weight than the UK government, the US military being worried about it.
Really, really fascinating. Yeah, I've personally had some psychic experiences in my life. First one was when I was just 12 years old and walking home from school, and I just suddenly came to know that me or my mum were going to lose our sister really soon. And 2 weeks later, my mum's twin sister died, and I felt guilty for years, like my thought pattern had somehow caused it. But, and then also before my mum died, I also, for 2 weeks before, just knew. Yeah, it's funny. I never realized before it was 2 weeks both times, but maybe that doesn't mean anything. But yeah, it's really interesting. You have these experiences and then you kind of just get back to your life. And, well, that can't be explained by anything I understand. I don't necessarily dismiss it, but I've just been thinking recently about, well, what if we were to actually look at how to really nurture those skills and to really start to put more focus on them and allow them to evolve? And is that something you're thinking about too? And if so, how?
Yeah, good question. I don't think I'm there in that space of being able to support people in their psychic things. My girlfriend, actually, sorry, my fiance, she does a lot of mediumship, and she has support from her friends, and she's in a group that sort of helps train these extrasensory perceptions. But I was thinking your story there, how difficult that must have been from this sort of dual perspective of, one, you feel guilty that maybe you were some part of the death of your mum's sister, and then at the same time you are terrified to tell anyone because they'll probably call you crazy or maybe lock you up. This is an issue with our society, is that there are no support networks for these types of things, and that is why I think ayahuasca is very effective at the moment, but it's not having the effect it could have because we don't have these traditions of looking to our elders, looking to the shamans for support in these things that are not mainstream in our society today.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So Richard's fiance is Natalia, who I interviewed in episode 13 of Going Conscious, and we talked about expanding mindset and healing femininity. So do check that one out if you haven't listened yet. And I will definitely be reaching out to Natalia to find out a bit more about that support group. It sounds really, really interesting.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I did a training course at I think it's like the London School of Psychic Studies, it's up in Kensington. They've been around for like 100 years. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle used to be like the head of it, so it's a very well established and well thought of institution. Which I didn't realise that we had institutions like that in the UK. But there are support networks out there for people, and another person is Shimmering Light Therapies. She's a friend of ours. She does these mediumship courses basically with her. You can check her out on Instagram at Shimmering Light Therapies.
Amazing. Will do. Thank you so much. So, Richard, as we bring our conversation to a close, I'd love to ask you, what does personal success look like to you? And how has this changed? And we touched on this a bit earlier when you talked about what success was and then getting there and finding that it was empty. So I'd love to hear about what it means now and how it's changed.
Yeah, obviously it's changed massively from my measure of success was how my body looked. And now I'm coming to think a bit more in terms of contribution. And this is something that I've kind of had to learn intellectually, like reading Jean-Paul Sartre and Abraham Maslow. Like they both kind of started out on this self-development journey. And I think a lot of people do start out that way of like, with Maslow's, he has this hierarchy of needs, and you have your basic needs like food at the bottom of his pyramid, and the top is self-actualization. But at the end of his life, and the same with Sartre's life, they both changed to be like, no, that's not the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid is contribution. And I think there is also this saying that the other side of this argument is you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give without being in a good place yourself. But I think that's partly true, but partly not true. And actually giving to others is a way of healing yourself. So I think now success is more about how much I can contribute to my community, to my friends, to my family, to society as a whole. So for me, the way I'll measure my success is that, well, firstly with clients, am I helping clients? Or am I putting good content out on Instagram or on my website? And then for the next few years, it's going to be, can I do a PhD? Can I do research that supports society by making breathwork and ayahuasca taken more seriously? And can I support my friends like Breath Guru, my girlfriend Natalia, my fiance Natalia, and my other breathwork friends by doing some really good research on breathwork and helping that whole community?
Incredible. I cannot wait to hear more about what comes out of your research, Richard. It sounds amazing. So is there a key takeaway or message from our conversation today that you'd like to share?
I think breathwork and ayahuasca, I think people should look into that. I think the message is that these are really unbelievably powerful tools, so much more effective than what we've had in the past. And yes, it is a little bit of a big tangential change in direction for a lot of people, but I think you can be trusting that these things are going to be really effective. And yeah, maybe the other message should be contribution, like think about how you can contribute to other people to make them happy, but how can contribution help you in your self-development journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And is there a book you've read recently that you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, so The Leap by Steve Taylor was one I read quite recently, and it's basically about enlightenment, and it's about people who are enlightened. Like, there are a lot more people who are enlightened than we realize, and he actually goes through and sort of categorizes what it means to be enlightened and gives a lot of examples of people who are enlightened, not just your Oshos and your Jesuses and people like that, but artists and writers and things like that, and how they would express their enlightenment through their art, through their writing. Like William Wordsworth was one, and there's a few others he mentioned, but it was just so interesting to see that broken down and understood, because it has felt like this sort of like mythical thing, enlightenment, that only happens in India or on the top of a Himalayan mountain. But yeah, you can see that it's happening. And Steve Taylor, he's like, I think he's a professor at Manchester University, and he still goes to Manchester United games, but he's also basically enlightened in some ways.
Wow. Sounds incredible. I've just written it down and I'm going to order it today. I can't wait to get stuck into that, because you do think of enlightenment so much as something which is really unattainable and the end of a very, very, very hard climb. And actually to understand it in a broader way, I mean, it resonates with me because that is what I believe. I do believe that enlightenment is possible like that in so many different ways, and still to be part of society. And I think that's also really important. You don't have to remove yourself from society. And we've both talked about this before, when you're on your spiritual journey and the pendulum kind of swings and you just want to go into the jungle and stay there. And then you start to come back and realize you have something to offer. You have a big contribution to make, like you say. And so that sounds really, really fascinating. I look forward to reading it.
Yeah, it won't let you down, I promise.
Thank you. And lastly, Richard, where's the best place for listeners to find you online?
Yeah, so my website is thebreathgeek.com, and I'm on Instagram at thebreathgeek, and there's an underscore between the and breath, so the_breath_geek.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining today. It's been wonderful speaking again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nikki.
I hope you found this episode interesting. Richard mentioned how Eckhart Tolle was an inspiration for him in his spiritual journey. And you might have heard me talk about him before, but I want to share again how important Eckhart Tolle has been on my journey too. His book, The Power of Now, is the book I've given to most people. And I give people a lot of books. If you haven't read it yet, I really recommend it. It will help you to live so much more in the present moment and to understand how fundamentally that contributes to your happiness and also to your success. Living in the now and really existing in the present moment is so key to balance and to mental health. I also, perhaps even more, love his other book, A New Earth, which will help you to see how your path can contribute to the global spiritual awakening. Really incredible and inspiring work, and I think it's really suitable for anyone to dive into. In our conversation, Richard and I touched on how relationships change as you change and the resistance and fears that can come up in those around us. We also talked about how, in those situations, we can put our own projections and journeys onto others and expect or wish for them to change too. And this really reminded me of how important it is to give space to our change and to be accepting of the change we see in others, as well as to surround ourselves with like-minded people too. Suddenly our mission feels so much easier when we have the company of others on a similar path, so finding that community really helps to drive our success. We discussed the power of changing your life with your mindset too, which is such a huge topic I'm focusing on with my clients at the moment. You can have all your business strategies in place, but if your mindset isn't there too, especially if you're an entrepreneur driving your own business, then it just won't work. And vice versa, of course. You can't just have the mindset and not the strategy, but mindset is so important. We all have fears and limiting beliefs, self-sabotage and imposter syndrome, which come up and block us from our growth and success. And when we reprogram our mindset, use tools, use strategies, coaching methods, and many more methods to really change our mindset, our life literally changes in front of our eyes. So this is also evident for when we move from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, which I've seen myself deliver really impressive results. And I think that this all links right back to what Richard said about how we all have the power to heal ourselves. We have the power to do everything, and we have the power inside of us. So it's up to us to work on our mindsets. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and short review. If you think people you know might benefit from listening to Going Conscious, please share it with them. I know I get much of my inspiration from podcasts which are shared with me. For all episodes, our library and more, visit goingconscious.com. Your support to spread this positive message of fulfillment and freedom means so much. As well as hosting Going Conscious, I help conscious entrepreneurs to transition and unleash their power and purpose with my transformation coaching and conscious brand consulting work. Discover more on Instagram at Nikki Trott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you and to talk about your goals, questions, or how we can work together. And if I don't hear from you before then, see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going Conscious. As always, live your freedom.